Now let's take a look at a story that I think a lot of us are really interested in here. And no, I'm not talking about anything involving Elon Musk and Twitter. What I'm talking about is the recent announcement, surprise, of Apple adding a new lockdown mode to iOS 16, iPadOS 16, and macOS Ventura. This mode allows users to restrict the channels that are usually used by the most intrusive exploits and hacks. It's designed to protect journalists, dissidents, and others at risk of state sponsored snooping. Max, tell us a little bit more about lockdown mode. What are the implications here?
All right, so this is so exciting that I'll try to do my best not to just get lost into some crazy things. So lockdown mode, what it does is that it kind of restricts the surface attack of your iPhone and the various applications to avoid, um, let's say, as you say, targeted persons to be attacked by what very sophisticated attacks actually. So what it does is that, in a sense, it restricts a lot of things that your phone will normally do. For example, it restricts the opening of attachments, for example, file attachments when you're in a chat session with someone, which is one of the vectors, infected files. It's also blocking you from receiving unsolicited FaceTime calls. And there are a variety of other things which are restricted there. For example, it's blocking wired connections between your iPhone and computer accessories. It's also preventing you from installing Apple beta configuration profiles, and so on. So it really does a lot to restrict the attack surface on the phone. And frankly, that's super exciting, not just for this targeted audience, but also, I mean, for whoever is interested in privacy.
And I think that that's the interesting thing here is that this is a mode that's designed for a specific subset of users that might be a target of state sponsored terrorism or that's not the right word, state sponsored snooping. But truly, this is a really interesting technology, and the implications go way beyond an iPhone. For one thing, most of the coverage is focused on iPhones, but macOS Ventura also has lockdown mode in it, which is, I think, an interesting take. The next thing is that everyone in the industry expects that Google will do what Google does, which is to offer a similar feature in Android next. And in fact, that may be one reason that Apple didn't tease this before they released it, because maybe they wanted to have a little bit of a time to talk about this feature before Google does exactly the same thing. But frankly, I'm going to give Google a pat on the back if they do, because every phone should have something like this. The fact that there are all these exploits that work in many cases invisibly to hack into phones, to snoop on phones. I mean, we've talked previously about the NSO group and Pegasus and things like that. Um, it means that phones need this kind of capability for people who are especially sensitive to this sort of attack. And as you mentioned, I mean, that could include people who are unwittingly, you get an attachment sent as an iMessage or a FaceTime call or something that unwittingly hacks your phone. Also, as you mentioned, the connectivity issue is really interesting too, because for a long time, it's been possible to hard lock an iPhone. By the way, you do that by just pushing a volume and the power button together, and it will require the passcode. And it also disables a lot of the external connectivity. This really shuts all that stuff down, because for a long time it was possible to plug in a device that could basically drain all the data off of the phone over a wire. Well, that won't work anymore. Now, presumably the technology works, let's hope, and this will stop the so-called evil maid attacks and a lot of these other exploits. But Max, I know you and I have always been interested in privacy enhancing technologies. I was actually looking at this and thinking, I wonder what it would be like to use that mode.
Oh, I would absolutely love to enable that as soon as it gets out. And I think it comes down to a variety of things, right? I mean, we've all been so much these mobile phone technologies, and I'm not talking about macOS Ventura and so on, but if you look at the mobile devices, there's so much grabbing our attention. And one of the things I've been working on lately is really trying to reduce my kind of addiction in a way to applications. So trying to put in controls to avoid this, to avoid that, to avoid disturbances and so on. And the fact that you can add an extra layer of kind of privacy, an extra layer of security to your phone and to the operation that you do is really extremely appealing, at least to me. So I would really like to test that as soon as possible. And I'm really also interested because we've been talking about some of the mainstream features of that, but maybe there are much more things there. Like for example, people walking around with AirDrop enabled and open to all, and they can, all of these things that we sometimes forget to turn on. So to me, it signals that Apple and maybe even Google at some point in time, even though I think it's a bit crazy, they're kind of focusing more on securing their devices, and I think it's long overdue.
Absolutely. And I've previously turned on some of these features as Apple has added them myself. For example, the private relay and not downloading attachments and emails and things like
Hmm.
that. I'm just glad to see more and more of these things be enabled in a way that, like you said, is easy for someone who's maybe not as technical
Hmm.
to enable and use. And as I said as well, I really do hope that Google adds this to Android and Microsoft adds this to Windows.
Hmm.
Frankly, I would love to see a lockdown mode in Linux.
And
Wouldn't
actually,
that be
and
awesome?
and one thing I'm thinking about as well, building into that. So the great thing is that this is really meant for a non-technical audience, and maybe we could even see, and maybe that's a crazy thought, but we could even see that there will be that this lockdown mode could become an advanced lockdown mode, and we could see that there will be a regular lockdown mode, which kind of restricts by default, or which gets kind of built in into the platform where things are logged out by default, and you can add an extra layer of security. I'm really curious and excited about that, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see where this goes, but I thought that we would share it with the audience here as our closer look segment.